Good evening, folks. I wanted to start off the videos with something that I get asked about quite a bit, and that's having a bar that comes out of the mold generally looking cosmetically okay. And what that means is that you've got a bar face whenever it comes out of the mold that's not going to be full of voids, holes, pockets. You've got a nice, good, clean face to work with. And it seems to be something that people struggle with quite a bit. And look, I'm not going to tell you that it's not something that everyone doesn't struggle with. The truth of it is anybody that's getting into doing this as a hobby is going to run into the pitfalls and challenges as they progress and move through. And this is just a natural part of it. But look, don't worry, it's absolutely possible to have a face come out that's generally flat, something that you can work with, that you can clean up and polish and be proud of. But it's really all going to start with how you treat these things. This is a regular graphite mold. You can get these off of eBay, Amazon, really PMC Supplies, I think, sells them. They're very common. I go through graphite molds constantly. I use these nonstop. They produce a very good, clean finish. But you do have to treat these as being disposable for the most part. You're going to get a life cycle out of them. As you start to get wear and tear, you're going to shed graphite, lose some off of the edges. You'll start to see it thin down. And so this is one that's actually retired, no longer in service. I know that for a hobbyist, you're probably going to be okay continuing to use this. Perfectly safe. There's nothing wrong with it. But for me, the second that I start to lose sidewall there, since it's a business, it's going to produce a product for me that's inconsistent. And consistency is very important. I really can't have items that start to get a little wider here or there than others. They don't fit well into packaging. And in general, you know what? Call it OCD, but it's a peeve of mine. I like to have everything consistent. So this one's a retired mold, but it's going to serve to demonstrate, or I guess highlight what it is that I talk about. And so as you use graphite molds, as they get exposed to the elements, whenever you start to rub on the side of it, graphite sloughs off. Now, you may not be able to see it here, but you can see, I think, kind of on the walls, just with my fingers, graphite is sloughing off. Well, every time that you pour on the interior, and I'm going to assume for most of you here that you don't have this coating on, every time that you pour, your graphite's sloughing off as well. So every time you dump out, you do this a little bit more and you're sloughing off some graphite. Well, what that does is whenever you get these brand new, they got a really hard finish on the outside. Not a lot of porosity. And so your first couple of pours are going to look dynamite. Subsequently, after that, though, you're going to have pours that start to demonstrate some challenges on your face. And what you're running into is the more porous this graphite gets, the more that it's going to hold moisture, the more that it's going to hold air. And that's going to require you to do a couple of different things in order to get a good cosmetically appealing face. And one is you're going to have to heat the mold. Now, there's a lot of different people out there that say get these things red hot. There's some that just say get it slightly warm. Honestly, I set them on the furnaces for 2 to 3 minutes. And I consider that good to go. It's baked out most of the moisture. You're not going to get the air out of here. And that's where the second piece of this comes into play. And I talk about it a pretty good bit with folks, and that's a good mold coating, boron nitride. Boron nitride is going to provide you with a very smooth, heat-resistant, temporary finish that lays on the inside of this mold. And it's going to do two things for you. One is it's going to prolong the life of your mold. So your mold will stay the shape that it is when you buy it longer, because you're not sloughing off graphite. You're actually taking off bits and pieces of that boron nitride, and it will eventually fail after so many pours, and you'll have to reapply. But then two is when it comes out, because you kind of seal off the interior of this mold, the porosity that's on the outside, well, this extends all the way through that graphite. So when you dump 2200 degree copper on the inside here, it's going to superheat this thing really quickly. Any porosity that's on the outside, the bottoms, the edges, that air is just going to go right up into it. And it's going to give you a bubbling effect. And that's going to show itself on your face, which you do not like. So How do you use this stuff? Well, it's really not that difficult. First off, whenever people ask me, how do I clean my molds? You don't really clean these things. I certainly never put them in water. I don't use anything that's going to take graphite off. And even using a rag on a graphite mold, if my finger is rubbing off graphite, a rag's going to rub off even more. So we're going to take off this boron nitride because it started to fail. It's coming off on the edges. That's going to show itself on the sides. And so we're just going to take this off, and I use compressed air. So that's what we've got. Now, to apply boron nitride is very simple. I don't want to tell you that less is more, but I can certainly tell you that more is less, because you don't want to put this stuff on so that it runs. You want to hold it away from you. Try not to breathe it. I think you'll come away with a pretty good buzz feeling if you do. And then you just want to hit the face of this thing and the inside edges so that you get a good smooth coat and it lays on. It will turn to a liquid after a certain amount of time, so you don't want it to run in there and create streaks. But then what you get is this. And for many of you, this is going to be an absolutely perfect mold to use. Again, if it was just a hobbyist type of thing, I would still be using this mold. There's nothing wrong with it. From a safety perspective, you've got plenty of sidewall left. But the inside of this is coated with boron nitride. And what that boron nitride is going to do is it's going to lay on here and form a thermoprotective coating on the inside that will shield the graphite mold from all of that heat to a certain degree. But it's also, more importantly, going to prevent those gases from being superheated and coming right up through your mold into the face of that bar and giving you those air pockets, holes, bubble things that kind of show up, what I would just call voids in the face. You're going to go a long way in eliminating those. Now, after a couple of uses, you may get, let's say you get 3 or 4 pours out of this, maybe 5, and then you're just going to start to notice that it fails. Or maybe it doesn't. If you come back the next day and you want to reuse it and it still looks fine, there's no problem. You don't put quite as much, but I just loosely hit it and kind of get it reapplied. And then we're off to the races. Now, after this dries, what I do is set it on the furnaces and just allow it to heat up for probably about 3 minutes. Again, it doesn't need to be red hot, but you do kind of want it hotter than warm. I'll certainly say that. And really, that's to get rid of any moisture that's in this thing. If it's red hot, maybe let it cool down to where it's not quite so red hot. I'm not a fan of pouring into a red hot mold, but you do want it to be fairly hot, not to fairly warm. And you're not going to damage this boron nitride by heating it up. It's going to bake it in, let it set, and then whenever you pour, continue to pour until you start to see this stuff slough off. And whenever it starts to fail, it's going to come off in the pour. Now, if it's on the sides, maybe you don't care about it. But if you do, because it will show itself by putting ridges into the bar, pull it out, let it cool down, reapply, or preferably using compressed air, blow it out, get it good and clean, start from scratch, put you a new finish, let it dry, warm it back up just to bake that in good, and you're off to the races again. If you pour into a graphite mold, or for cast iron, that being said, I use this for graphite or cast iron. It will give you a better, more cosmetically appealing face. It will eliminate bubbling. The last thing you want to see is pouring into a mold and having it look like it's still boiling on you. So it should be a nice, smooth, easy pour. Pour up and down in slow motion within the mold. The bigger the bar, the slower you have to pour, and the more cautious you have to be about moving around the mold up and down as you pour. As you pour, it's going to create little turbulence pockets. If you do it in one spot, that one area is going to trap a little air bubble in there. And as the rest of it is cooling, that will be a void for you. So you want to avoid that. And you do that by going back and forth within your mold. So boron nitride, a slow controlled pour, moving back and forth within the mold. And then last but not least, when you get finished with your molds, do not leave these exposed to the elements because they will not last. Cast iron will rust, it will oxidize. All of these things, whenever you go back and you clean it off, you're taking off material. And what that does is it creates more porosity, it opens up the graphite, it opens up the metal, and that's going to introduce potential for air to get into your pore. So please take care of your molds, keep them out of the weather, keep them certainly away from moisture as much as possible. Boron nitride is not the least expensive stuff. I believe you can get this for $100 for a 2-pack. If you're a hobbyist, it should last you a pretty good length of time. I go through this stuff, it seems like toothpaste. But I will tell you personally, I do not pour without using boron nitride. ZYP coatings is, look, I've tried a couple of different brands. They really all work about the same. This one is just one I've gotten very familiar with, and I've been using Zip coatings now for several years. Even though I'm not married to anyone in particular, use whatever you care for. The boron nitride spray will work well. You're also going to see it available in a powder or paste. I find that the aerosolized is, although not the most economical, it's the most user-friendly and really the most practical for somebody to use, especially if you're doing this as a hobby. That will give you clean pores, give you a much better face to start working with, so that whenever you go to actually polish these beauties up, you don't have to work so hard. And ultimately, that's the key for all of it. So that's it really for this video. Like I said, boron nitride and good mold care are going to be what go a long way in giving you a good looking face. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. silvercoastcopper.com. You can drop me a message in the contact us and it goes right to my email, or you can leave a comment in here and I'll try and get it, although I'm not going to tell you that I'm the world's fastest with that. I'm fairly easy to locate, but I'm always here if you've got any questions. That's it for the first video. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. Again, it's a question that I get asked countless times, and really it's the easiest to address. It all starts in the very beginning. It's just like painting. 90% of this is in the prep work, and I know that that's not the most fun, but at the end of the day, the goal is to have this be something that's enjoyable for you, takes as little headache as possible, and ultimately is a very safe hobby for you. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And like I said, if you got any questions, don't hesitate to leave in the comments or shoot me a message on silvercoastcopper.com. You guys have a great evening.